What a fabulous start. I've come here today. It's a little fishery right in the heart of the Fens. It's called Pisces. Pisces, and it's a holiday camp. You know, there's a caravan park. So if you stay at the camp, you actually get a chance to fish all the waters. And this lake here is called the Syndicate Pool. And what I wanted to do today was target the bigger fish of the pool. And this one is a big one, feels like a carp. So today I was going to use biggish baits, big pieces of luncheon meat. Oh, it's a good fish. Got heavy elastic. And already before I started, I cupped in a mixture of luncheon meat and pellets on the bottom, and then just started to loose feed a few pellets over. And this is second drop in with a big piece of luncheon meat, and I've hooked into this carp. It's a big fish too. Terrific fish. Just caught me in those reeds under there. Think I'll just have to add a couple of joints on here. Oh, it's out, it's pulled it out, I've pulled it out, it's all right. Just got to watch. I was a bit overconfident really. Beautiful fish to start with. Just caught a glimpse of it. It's a big mirror carp. Got a strong elastic in here, 14. But that was a terrific bite. The pole was wrenched out of my hand. Look at that elastic go. Really is flying. Beautiful fish, look at that. Ooh. That is really going. What a great way to start. Look at that beautiful big. Got it. First fish safely in the net. Look at that. Just a terrific fish. Try and pick it up and show it to you. But it's probably 5 pounds. Good idea if you can, when you're unhooking fish, is to actually take the fish, the hook out of the fish while it's still in the net, just to keep it safe and secure. Might need to use it's just hooked on the inside of the lip. What a fish though. Took a big piece of luncheon meat. Sort of, I thought I'd start off bottom. It's very, very warm. I'm about a foot off bottom. Just show this to camera. Terrific fish, this one. Look at that for a fish. Beauty, 4 pounder, straight away. Lovely fish. I'm feeding a mixture of luncheon meat and pellet. Just cupping it in so, although it goes down and attracts the fish, it will also keep some fish on the bottom. Draw fish into the peg, keep some on the bottom, some will come up, but like a good holding area for big fish. And I'm using some quite big pellets of meat on the hook. I'm going to feed some of those. Now I've punched these pellets out, and the reason I've done this is because fish are used to eating normal pellets. So if you punch luncheon meat the same, you know, just bigger, they're used to eating something of that shape. Usually find it works well. So I'm having a mixture of luncheon meat in the cup. And I've got 3 mil, these are 3 mil pellets, fish meal, Vandenheim pellets. I've just soaked them a little bit, not for long, just to soften them up, make them more acceptable to the fish. And I'm going to cup that in. Again, I've caught a big fish, so I'm going to cup that in again in this holding area. I've picked a spot just against those far bank trees. It's a very, very warm day. I mean, this is mid-August, early August, mid-early August, and there, I'm going to cup it in. Make a little bit of noise when it goes in to attract the fish. And the whole lot will go down slowly, attracting fish into the swim. And that spot there is just slightly shaded today. It is very, very warm. I'm going to put another one in because these are a 200 millilitre cup, so it's a fair size cup. I can get a lot of bait in there. I'm going to put another one in, 2 of these. This fishery is incredible. There's a lot of fish in here, a lot of big fish as well, so you don't have to be worried about feeding them. There's also a lot of silverfish that are stealing the bait all the time. So to get something to the bottom, you have to put reasonable volumes of bait in. Just another one over there, same place. This is the beauty of a pole cup, the fact that you can feed in exactly the same place. I've got a far bank marker. I can tip that bait exactly where the last one went. 2 good cupfuls there. And then fish on it and just see what happens. I'll loose feed a little bit over the top as well. As I said, these fish can take incredible volumes of feed. And at the moment, that last fish I caught up in the water, probably 18 inches off the bottom. If I'd have gone on the bottom, I'd have probably caught one as well. But I've got 2 rigs and we can go through those later on. But I think now we've fed, let's try and catch another fish. I'm also adding a little bit of loose feed over the top, just again with the 3mm pellets to make a bit of noise to help attract the fish into the swim. I've got this sort of large piece of luncheon meat suspended off bottom, quite unnatural really, but you'll be amazed how many times you can catch fish by doing this. And the good thing is it deters the smaller fish. This is something that you have to do in this lake, just try and deter those smaller fish. And the fish has actually got hold of that as it's going down and left it. A little bit of a waiting game today because we're fishing for big fish, and usually when you start fishing it doesn't, I mean that was incredible to catch that one that quickly. Usually you have to feed a little bit and fish a little bit before things happen and make things happen. The usual thing that fishing is all about, feeding bait. Feeding and attracting fish into your swim. We've got a good bed of feed on the bottom now, and now we're trying to attract fish in as well by loose feeding. And when you're fishing up in the water, it's necessary, you're really trying to catch fish on the drop, so it's necessary to lift your bait and then let it fall back in again. Let it fall back in, watch the float as it goes down. Quite often you get a bite as it's settling. And I can actually almost see the weight of that luncheon meat taken up on the float. Little fish peck at it, but usually when you get a bite from a big fish, it will be hooked immediately. It's just a matter of working away and getting fish into your peg. Big fish into your peg. I mean, if I put on 2 maggots now, that float would whistle away straight away with a roach or a rudd or a smaller fish. Plenty of indications that there are small fish there, definitely at the moment. Now, what is successful lake fishing? It just depends what you want to catch. You know, you may want to catch a load of small roach. Today though, I want to target the big fish. You know, that is my idea today of successful lake fishing, eliminating the small fish and catching just the big fish that I know live in this lake. Oh. This one feels like a bream. not a big, oh, I don't know, it's just over £1. So I'm just trying to target today these bigger fish. Oh, a lovely skim, about £1. It's a beautiful little fish. Big baits for bigger fish. Now that's important. Got a massive hook in its mouth. I'll unhook this one and then we'll run through the rig that I'm using and the elastic. Yeah, beautiful bream. The elastic that I'm using for the mid-water rig is a number 14. I just want to run through with you exactly how I fix it. Now I've got a carb connector on the end. It's called a Preston, it's Preston Innovations, and it's called a carb extra, a big one. You need a big connector with thick elastics to be able to tie it. So that is where you connect your main line to. And then I've got it running through, this is a top 2 carb kit. It's the same length as a normal top 3 section, but this section here is extra long. I've got a nice bush on the end here, which is an external bush. You have to use that to get, the elastic is so thick that the only thing you can use is this external bush to get the right diameter. It's a bull nose, Drennan bull nose, but the elastic slides over there really smoothly, smooth as silk, no abrasion at all. And then in the bottom, so I've got this through this top 2 kit. In the bottom here, I use this wire just to take it out. I've got an adjustable here. It's called an adjustable connector here on the bottom. And what it's got on there, it's a winder. And if I'm catching a lot of big fish, I can actually tighten this elastic up. If I'm catching slightly smaller ones, I can then slacken it off a bit so that the elastic is less tight. So for big fish next to snags or anything, I tighten it right up, or else I can loosen it off. And there's loads of spare elastic on there. And that just hooks out with this wire, just goes in, hooks out. But they're great because once you've put your elastic through, sometimes, you know, when you're fishing, you start fishing and it's hanging out, you can actually tighten it up, you know, while you're actually fishing with this adjustable plug there. So that plug goes in. You must make sure that you cut that plug to length so it goes up inside the pole, so that when you push the other section on, it doesn't catch onto it. So it has to go up far enough into the pole, probably something like 5 or 6 inches. And that's it, and then you can adjust it all to length. So on that one, I've got a 14 elastic, and my other rig, I've got a 16, so just a slightly heavier one for fishing on the bottom, but everything else is the same. Oh, this feels like a bream. Just gone on the bottom with, on the other rig, because I know there's fish there. Where I fed hard on the bottom with pellet and meat, I've just gone on the bottom with pellet. What's another one of these lovely bream? Just gone on the bottom with what they call a juicy pellet. It's a Vandenine. And it's quite a hard pellet, quite a hard, firm pellet. I've just gone right where I've cupped all that bait in. Another one of these. Took a beautiful sized pellet. I'll show you in a minute what it took. Look, beautiful skimmer bream. And this is what it took. Just slip that in the net. Took one of these, quite large pellets. It's as I say, a Vandenine juicy pellet. Natural flavour, but it's a sort of pellet that doesn't sort of readily dissolve in water, so it's a bit harder than normal. I can put this on this hook, nice big hook I've got there, thread that on there. It took that right off the bottom. I'm going to try and catch another one. Settled right on that bait that I'd cupped in earlier. It does take a little while sometimes for fish to come round. there is a little bit of cover under there from this, and it is incredibly hot today. We're having another one of these, like a mini heat wave. Temperature today must be somewhere about probably 26 degrees centigrade, which is quite high for this country. I've just dropped that in over them pellets that I cupped in, and I'm loose feeding just to attract in a few carp and bigger fish. Loose feeding 2 or 3 pouchfuls of fish meal pellet. What I'm doing is I'm actually feeding and firing a few of those pellets under that tree. That's where the carp are today, and I've got to try and lure them out. So I've put this again, it's on the bottom, right where I've cupped in all those pellets. So it's pretty, that's a good thing about fishing with a pole cup. You can fish in exactly the right area, and you can drop your bait in exactly the right area. Within probably 8 or 9 square inches, you know that's where the bait has gone down, and that's where your hook bait is also. It's that accurate. That's the beauty of pole fishing. You imagine trying to cast over there with a normal rod and line. Whereas with a pole, I can almost tuck that float under those bushes there. And then just leave it. We're fishing for big fish. I'm just leaving the bait and just let it settle on the bottom, waiting for bites. It's not instant action, but just waiting for the better quality fish. Another one of these bream. This feels like a good one, this. Real nice fish. Got thick elastic on here though, you know, 16 elastic is big. This is a 16 elastic, so it's, oh, it's a nice bream though, probably. Oh, it's a lovely fish. But of course it stands no chance at all on this heavy gear, because this realistically is carp gear. But these fish are, well, although the bream are coming okay, the carp are not really feeding well yet. I think it's because it's so warm. It's a nice one, about £2, lovely. Beautiful fish, and it took another one of those Vandenine expander pellets. You wouldn't even expect these fish to be feeding, really, it's so warm. It's a lovely one. Putting away. Now that fish I caught on the bottom, and I'll just run through this bottom rig exactly how I've set it up for you. The hook I'm using today is a good strong hook. It's a Drennan barbless carp feeder, and although it's called a feeder hook, the reason I'm using it is because it is a very, very strong hook, so it's ideal for big fish. And it's a size 12, which is good. You need a big hook if you're using, say, big lumps of luncheon meat or large pellets. You need a big hook to get a better hook hold. The line itself is 0.16 millimetre. It's a high-tech Browning Senatan, and 0.16 millimetre in sort of layman's terms is probably about a 6-pound breaking strain line. I've then got a 4-turn water knot to connect the main line and the hook length, and there's a number 9 shot just above that. You see that? Just a small number 9 shot just above that knot. And then I'm using a biggish float today for this, a 3/4 gram float, and so I've used an Olivet on the rig itself, fishing in say it's about 6 feet deep here. And this Olivet here it's a Drennan inline Olivet. The line goes through the middle, and I've plugged it with a small piece of carbon, so that I can actually move this quite easily without damaging the line. I can get hold of this, can pull it one way, pull it the other, but it stays in position. And then I've got a number 9 shot. That's a spare one underneath there. I can either pull it down onto the hook length, you know, if I need extra weight. The main line is 0.18 millimetre. Now that's 8-pound breaking strain. So that is pretty heavy gear. You know, that'll catch some big fish. Probably a little bit of overkill for that 2-pound bream, but you never know what you're going to catch in here. And the float itself is a Drennan again. I love that. I think they make some of the best carp floats out. This is a Drennan Carp 5, and it's a very, very strong float. It's got a carbon stem, incredibly strong, good balsa body. What I've done is I've put a small sleeve over the top of the bristle. It goes through an eye there, but then for extra security, for when I hook a big fish, I've put a sleeve over the top, just to stop that. The weakest part will be where that eye goes into the balsa. You know, if you hook a big fish, it can tear out. So I've put that little sleeve over the top as a double safety factor. And then up to the actual connector itself, and on there, I've just used this, overhand, it's a figure of 8 overhand loop to attach that. So that's really strong there as well. Be really careful when you tie this knot. You must tie a figure of 8 overhand loop, not the double granny that most people do. That's absolutely useless. So that basically is the rig that I'm using for catching these fish on the bottom. Now it's important that you keep feeding all the time, either cupping in. Today I'm loose feeding pellets, and just a good tip for holding your pole. You must be able to hold your pole steady while you feed. So what I'm doing is I'm actually resting the pole on my leg there and pushing down with my forearm of my right hand, pushing down. So I can really, look at that, look, no hands. I can actually strike by lifting my knee up in the air. But what this does, it enables me to feed with the catapult. So I can hold the actual pouch in my right hand, hold that upright so that I can feed. I don't even have to look. I don't even have to look. I go down to the pellets, fill the pouch, no problem at all. And everything is done in reverse. Instead of pulling the pouch back, you actually have to pull or push the catapult, the crutch of the catapult, push that forward and then release, like that. So everything is done in reverse. And of course, you know, when I'm fishing like this, oh, little dig there straight away. When I'm fishing like this, I'm always looking at the float. You'll see me sometimes talking to camera, but when you're actually fishing and you're picking up those pellets, you're not looking down at that at all. Always you're looking directly at the float, getting ready to strike. The bite can come at any time, and if you're not ready for that, then you'll miss it. I had one then. Just whizzed under that tree. It's a little bit awkward under the tree. I've got to actually pull it round. Normally I strike straight up. I've got to pull it round a little bit to actually hit the fish. I've got to pull it round and then try and get them away from them underwater obstructions immediately. But there's a fair bit of action. So even on a boiling hot day like this, there's fish feeding. Now these pellets, these juicy pellets, now and again one or two of them float. So what I'm doing is and I don't mind that, they're almost a neutral buoyancy, which is what you want. You want the pellet to take the weight out of the hook, but sometimes, even though you put your hook in, a big heavy hook, it will float. So I just check them, make sure they sink nice and slowly. The slower the better, because it will fool the fish. I'll just check them at my feet once I've put the hook in them. And then can ship out. And as I say, we're fishing right. I'm trying to get fairly close to that tree. I think a little fish has taken that straight away. Trying to get fairly close to that tree because that's some sort of natural shade today. There's a little one whizzing with it. I don't really want to strike. I really want that one to let go of it. Loads of small rudd and that sort of thing here, and I want that to get to the bottom. Ah, that's it. I think that's okay. And then it's a matter of, once you're out there to feed again, I'm putting two, because I'm fishing near the bottom, I'm putting 2 pouchfuls in and then leaving it, rather than just a few pellets all the time, which bring the fish up in the water. Putting 2 goodish pouchfuls in and then fishing over where I've cupped all that extra bait in. And all the time there's plenty of movement on the float. Plenty of movement, but the fish that take it should be either bream or carp off the bottom there. Once you get through the smaller sort of silver fish, and there's loads of them in here. There's rudd, there's roach, half-pound roach, there's eyed up to a pound, there's chub, there's lots of different species of fish. Once I get to the bottom, then it has a chance to settle, and a chance for those bigger fish just to browse around and take the bait. Feels like another one of these bream. There seems to be plenty of them down there, but the carp probably might be too warm for them to be feeding. Look at that elastic. Oh no, this is not a bream. This could be, but that elastic is miles too strong anyway. It's another quality fish. Caught a glimpse of it just then. I thought it might have been a tench. It just does seem to be fighting a bit harder than the bream. Oh yeah. Yes, it is. Just caught a glimpse of it then. It's a lovely tench. Once again on that pellet on the bottom on the feed. So you wouldn't expect tench to be feeding these sort of fish in the middle of the day, would you? Look at that. But this gear I've got on is so strong. Look at that. Probably a £3 tench that, and it stood no chance whatsoever. Well, you're having a great time targeting these fish. There. Perfectly hooked again. Look at that. Just hooked in the side. Probably 2.5 pound, I should think, but a lovely fish, a nice fish. It's okay, but I think, and we're catching a few fish, but I think it might be a good idea, even though I wanted just big fish, just to have a look and see what other species there are in here. There might be roach and rudd. Let's try and have a little fast and furious bit of catching fish up in the water, just to see what's in here. Just change tactics a little bit. I've put a fairly light rig on and come right up in the water because it is very, very warm now. And this time of year you can expect, still got a pellet on the hook, you can expect fish to come right up. The only problem here is that they're probably going to be small fish. And that was one then, it had a bite then immediately, it didn't take it. The float whizzed off. Did you see the way the float whizzed off? Immediately I dropped it in. There it goes again. These are just small fish taking the bait. I've got a reasonable firm pellet on still the same pellet, or the same type that I was catching those bream with. Oh, I felt that fish, took it straight away. Don't know what this is. Just as soon as I drop the pellet in, be a little rudd or something like that, I should think, but they're right up in the water. These are taking those pellets as I drop them in. You know, these are competing. Oh, it's a roach. Look at that, a roach. Probably, I'm gonna lift it. Beautiful, probably 4-ounce roach. Absolute perfect condition, look at it. Gorgeous looking fish. Took that big juicy pellet off the surface. Just as I lowered it in, it went, whiz, took it straight away. Yeah, beautiful little fish. But these are the fish. You know, when I mentioned earlier about feeding, these are taking a lot of this bait. It may seem like you're feeding heavy when you're pouching bait in, but a lot of it is being intercepted by these small fish. And I think we'll be able to whiz out there again with these juicy pellets and catch another one. Trying to pick a small one, still checking to make sure that it sinks, because they're almost like semi-floating, especially when they dry out a bit. Just check it, make sure it sinks. And look at that one, can you see that? Look, it's actually, if I put that there, it's actually floating, isn't it? Can you see it's floating? That's no good. See, because if I put my rig in like that, the bait would sink, but look, the bait will still stay on the surface, look. So I need to change that. That one is a bit too buoyant for this. The hook I've got on here is slightly smaller as well, so of course that doesn't help. So hook on, get the pellet on, make sure it sinks, flick it out, make sure that it sinks. Yes, that one's sunk lovely. Look, just drop it in and it sinks. So good check on what's happening. I mean, if you want to fish on the surface, of course, you use one of those as a floater. If you see the carp come up on the surface, use one of the floating ones. Still with the same rig, and you can catch fish. So right up in the water, and we know that this is going to whiz away with all sorts of fish. You must keep feeding. Could well catch a big fish on there as well, but the problem is there's so many of these little silver fish. That one took straight away again. Look at the float. It just won't stand still. You drop your float in, watch that float. Just goes whizzing away. There it goes, see it shooting off at an angle. They're little fish, they're not getting hold of it properly. When a reasonable sized roach or a reasonable sized rudd gets hold of it, you can hook it. And feed again if I get a chance. Float's just not standing still, is it? But the pellet is reasonably firm, so it's staying on. If you use a pellet that's too soft, it wouldn't. That fish took it so hard it actually jerked the pole in my hand. It's incredible, isn't it, the movement? So many small fish out there. The float's whizzing away. What they're doing is they hit it so hard, don't always take the bait. That pellet's nice and firm, so I can strike. If I miss it, I can lift it, drop it straight back in again. But the most important thing is try and fool them fish by when you're feeding. There's another one now. Oh, flicked off. It was just a small rudd, it just flicked off. Just flicked right off then. Now the way I've set this rig up is a slightly smaller hook than I was using before. This is a 16, it's a Tubertini 808 barbless hook, and it's a finer wire, so a bit lighter. And I've got a really long hook length, a bit finer 0.14mm Browning Senatan, but that hook length is sort of probably 16 inches. And I've put all my shot above that. Here, just above that knot, a main line of 016. All them shot there, and then a small, once again a Drennan, it's a carp 2, 4x12, which is 0.2 of a gram. So a smallish float, and then up to a number 10 elastic, which is probably a bit over the top for these small fish. But all those shot are under there, so I can lift and drop, and the bait will actually drop from the surface down. You can imagine that there's no weight down. Most of the weight is just under the float, no weight at all, so you get a free fall. This can usually fool the bigger fish. Lots and lots of fish activity. Look at that, straight away. They're not big fish, these are small fish, but it's all action. You know, when it goes quiet sometimes during the day on these hot sunny days, and you want to catch some fish. It's another lovely roach. Only 3 or 4 ounces, but absolutely beautiful fish. Perfect, beautiful looking. Those gorgeous colours, really is a silver fish underneath. Look, lovely red tinge fins. Perfect. That'll be great when it gets to about £2, that. Perfectly hooked through the top lip, and it took that sort of biggish pellet. But there is so many small silver fish here, and I mean small half-ounce fish, that it's almost impossible to use maggots. You know, you have to use the bigger baits such as corn and pellet. You know, and these are a biggish pellet that I'm putting on here. Probably something like 5 or 6 mil, this pellet. Every time I go out, check that bait again. And I could well catch a big fish, you just never know. The most important thing is, as always, to keep feeding. So I'm dropping that bait in there. Remember how I had that shot in? The actual shot was just below the float, so the pellet is in free fall. The bite straight away. The pellet is in free fall, and now what I usually do is feed and then lift up the pellet, drop the float back in. It's a matter of, oh, and there it's shot off again. It's a matter of just dropping back through your feed all the time. You lift, and there it's gone again. Not that positive bite though, so lift, drop, hardly any weight there, the weight's just below the float, and then wallop, and it's in. Another little fish, I don't know what this is. Another little roach, I should think. But all action, non-stop. Oh, this is a rudd. It's probably a rudd. Slightly bigger fish. But I can swing these, even though I can swing these fish all right. This one's probably 5 or 6 ounce. Just about swingable, look at that. But look, once again, the beautiful colours. The actual fins on that fish. Look, just look to see how red they are. Perfect, absolutely beautiful, but probably about 5 or 6 ounces. And you can catch these one after the other. Gorgeous. All action fishing, but using baits other than maggot, you know, using what I would call probably your traditional managed fishery type waters. Baits, you need pellets and you need meat, you know, different baits to avoid the really tiny fish. I mean, that was quite good quality, that one. This pellet's pretty firm. I can put it on, drop it in, check the pellet. That one was just sinking, you know, almost neutral buoyancy, what I would call perfect. So I'm going to get a slower drop now. When this goes in, I'm going to get a much, much slower drop in the water. So this surface fishing is all about lift and drop, and try and fool those slightly larger fish. And feed, of course, feed. And look at all those pellets I'm putting in. I'm into another fish straight away. All those pellets I'm putting in there, you might think, it's incredible, you know, how come it takes that one that's on the hook? But the fact is that the fishery is so prolific You know, there are thousands of fish there, all competing for food. Look, there's another big rudd, and I actually just dunked that pellet in the water and it grabbed it straight away. I said that one was a good one, didn't I? A real free fall, slow pellet. And another 6-ounce rudd took it immediately. But there's so many fish competing for this food that I doubt anything actually arrives on the bottom. You know, when I'm cupping in with a pole cup, then yes, something gets there. But when you feed, I bet nothing gets to the bottom. There's so many of these little silverfish whizzing in and out, plus other fish as well. So it's incredible the amount that you have to feed to keep those fish occupied, and yet they'll still take your hook bait. Just look at that when you feed. It's amazing, isn't it? I told you how many fish there were there, and now when I feed pellets, look, these pellets are going in. Just going in, and fish. Just see the swirls and the boils, and it looks like there's a duck come to visit us as well. I had a coot earlier on today and I fed it up with bread. That cheeky duck taking my bait. It won't like it when I bring the pole round. Look, I see it's whizzed away now. I've just fed, so I'm going to drop this bait. This bait's going to drop from top to bottom. Just drop it straight in and watch it whiz away. There it goes, straight on. It's incredible, that, isn't it? I mean, it's instant action. But sorting out the because I'm using pellet, I'm sorting out the you could still being successful because I'm sorting out the bigger fish. If I was using maggot, look at that, that is a real clonking fish. Really big. Looks like a rudd, but it isn't, it's a roach. I'm just gonna lift it. Who would dare to lift a half-pound roach? Look at that. But by catching these bigger fish, you can still be successful. If I was using maggot, there'd be little fish like that, but targeting it with big baits up in the water, and it's all action. It's a fish every cast. So it's important that you just keep catching. And all the time I'm feeding, there's still that bait on the bottom there waiting for when I go back for the bigger fish. So just a little interlude, the feeding is still attracting the fish down below as well, plus all these smaller fish, half-pound roach up in the water. I'll need my disgorger on that one. Just really took the bait. Lovely, beautiful fish. Perfect condition. Fish is still swirling out there, even though that... Oh, I didn't like that. Mrs. Duck didn't like that. As I fired those last lot of pellets, but it did really scare those fish a little bit. I put a couple of pouchfuls in before I shipped out. Sometimes it doesn't hurt. You can pouch it, then lift up your bait, drop it, and that's a lovely slow fall. I'd checked that pellet, and it really was a slow fall. Oh, it shot straight away. Just lift up the pole as it goes away. Just lift it up. Oh, this is a miniature. How did that? Must have been half a pellet on that one. That's unusual to catch a fish like this on pellet. This is a real baby. I'm not even going to put this one in the net. This little baby about 1.5 ounces, 2 ounces. Mind you, I'll tell you what, there's plenty of matches where I've loved to catch these. A 2-ounce fish has been so important. In fact, sometimes they're real specimens when we're match fishing. I'm going to put him straight back, those little tiny fish. I think I've had enough of those, and now I'm going to feed again. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll show you how to prepare punched luncheon meat and then go back on the bottom and try and target some of those larger fish. The meat I'm using today has been specially developed for fishing. You can't eat it. You know, when you're out fishing, if you're a bit hungry, you can't eat this stuff. This is a specially flavoured one. It's for fishing only. It's Vandenine, and it's called sweet meat, this one. So I like to use, you know, sweet things are sometimes good in the summer. And I've used a big punch. I've got several different size punches, but the first thing to do is cut this meat up so that you can punch it. And if you're using a reasonable size punch, which I am, then I usually cut this meat into sort of 3 separate pieces. So 1 And then just slice the other one. They don't have to be exactly the same sizes. The thing about this meat is it's harder and tougher than the normal commercial sort of type meat that you'd get, or the edible meat that you'd get in a supermarket. Now there's the punch, good size punch. And what I do is I actually punch this out. This is the stuff I'm going to use on the hook. So you can punch this out. One. As you punch the next one, look, it pushes that one out. So I just don't worry. I sort of just keep punching. Usually with this one, I'm getting 3 across, look. Just keep punching these out like that. As many as you want. I won't do them all because it takes up a load of camera time, but these are just a lovely, good sized piece, a slug of meat. And it is, if you look at it, it is the shape of a pellet, but of course much larger. So that will target the bigger fish. Then when you finish that, you get a piece with all little holes in it. You can chop that up. Don't waste anything. Just chop all that up finely and then feed it in your pole cup. So you can use every little bit of meat that you've got. But these are really fairly hard, firm slugs of meat. Try to keep them out of the sun because sunlight can affect them. But they're fairly hard sort of, if you look at them, fairly hard slugs of meat. I'm going to punch some slightly smaller ones as well so that I can chop and change. You can actually cut these in half as well. You do loads of things to it, but they are perfect for the fish to take, you know, nice and round. You imagine that going into the fish's mouth, the shape of it, you know, they suck it in easier, much easier than a square piece. It just goes in easier and it will catch you more fish. So a good pellet punch, there it is there. This one's a fox punch. Just punch out as many as you can, doesn't take any time at all. You can punch out loads out of that one tin, probably enough for a day, and then just slice it up. And you're ready to fish. And I think we're ready to go and catch the big fish. It's incredible that I sort of went out with one of those big pieces of luncheon meat that I was punching out. Not right on the bottom, just off bottom, even though I've fed on the bottom. And look at this, cracking rudd. You wouldn't even think they'd take big lumps of luncheon meat, would you? Oh, that's a beauty. I'm going to have to net this one. It's probably 12 ounces, that. Just that big piece of luncheon meat. When you look at their mouths, you think, well, how could that get that big piece of luncheon meat in there? Look at that. This was intended for a carp. The big rudd took it instead. Beautiful fish again. Just shows you, so it doesn't, luncheon meat is good, but these bigger silverfish will still take it. They will eat anything. Gorgeous fish. Let me show you how I actually hook this luncheon meat on, because it is quite important. Now I've kept the meat in the shade today, the sun's shining, so I've just kept it in my cool box with an ice pack in there. Meat can actually melt, this luncheon meat can actually melt if there's too much sunlight and it dries out a bit. So I've got the pellet of meat there, and I actually put the hook through the middle of it, so it sort of balances it. So put the hook. You can actually, because it's round, you can actually put the hook in and sort of threadle the hook round. So it hangs. Can you imagine that? If you drop it in the water, that's exactly how it hangs. It's perfectly natural as it floats down, with just a little part of the shank showing. Fish will grab hold of that, and of course you hook them every time. But that's a nice, even way to put meat on the hook, so it drops slowly through the water, but exactly at that pellet shaped angle. Oh, it's a lovely rudd, that. Beautiful rudd, that, on meat up in the water. It's not what I was after. I was after bigger fish than that, but I say up in the water, I'm now probably only about, this swims say 5.5 foot deep. So I'm probably about 18 inches, 12 or 18 inches off the bottom. I'm getting lots of little digs, but I'm trying to leave those. You see when the float bangs, and trying to leave those and look for a real positive bite. When a carp takes, it will actually pull the elastic out with the power that it takes. So all those little digs are to be ignored, and a little bit of loose feed. You'll see this encourages the small fish around, but a little bit of loose feed around the float. And immediately, can you see those silverfish? It's incredible how many there are there. And that's the problem. They're the ones that you have to sort of get through those, but they're right in the top, say 12 inches of water. And hopefully when you do that, you know, the actions of those smaller fish flying up attracts the bigger fish below, and that's what you're hoping to catch. But they're a bit crafty as well, and in this heat, don't always want to feed as readily as at sort of early morning or late evenings. That was a bit more positive bite. The float just popped down a bit. Still no striking. Every now and again you need to check your bait. Just lift up, check you've got your bait, and my bait's hanging there. See it hanging in the middle there perfectly. Drop it back in. And that's when you can sometimes, if it really whizzes off, be a big fish. If it goes off slowly, that went off slowly, then that would have been a small fish. Or maybe a bream. Sometimes bream take it. I struck at that one and missed it. So it would have probably been a small fish that couldn't actually get that bait in its mouth. Great fun though, I mean lots and lots of bites. Just a matter of sorting out the larger fish. You've got to be careful with this luncheon meat, because if you can see when I showed you the float I was using a real thick bristle, that enables you to use heavier baits, like say a big piece of luncheon meat. If it's too heavy, if you've got a fine bristle on your float, it will actually just take it under. Even this one, you sort of have to almost undershot the float, so, and then you'll see the luncheon meat take up and it'll just take the bait down. You can actually tell when the bait's gone because the float comes up a little bit in the water. So it's a matter of just feeding, trying to, there's an odd big fish moving right under those trees. In the rushes as well, you can hear fish. You know, these big carp, you can hear them crashing about. Doesn't always mean to say they're feeding though. And I can see the silver, even though this water is very well coloured, as I feed, I can see the silver flashing of the roach and the rudd just below the surface. But as I said, that activity does encourage bigger fish to come in. And lifting the bait and dropping it through that. But there is a chance that, like just a little while ago, that a big rudd or a big roach will take it. It's quite a small fish. Well, it's probably a 4-ounce fish, but it just shows you. Probably 4 or 5 ounce, I call it a small fish. It's not a bad fish really. But just about lift this one. Probably 4 or 5 ounces, perfect condition, perfectly. How did they get that big lump of luncheon meat in its mouth? Probably at the moment when the big carp move in or the big fish move in, they will push those smaller fish out. You know, they're gone. So you just have to, that really tells you when the big fish are there. When you stop getting bites from those smaller fish, it's usually when the larger carp have arrived. And that's what you have to do, keep feeding, feeding, feeding. Try and feed those off, get them out of the way. Because when they go, you know there'll be some big carp below them. This is a great fish to finish up on. Really went mad when I hooked it on a piece of luncheon meat. On the bottom though. I don't know what it is. Feels like a carp, but it could be a bream. really fighting well. But amazing how that luncheon meat works. This is just a goodish bream. But just really fighting well. Maybe a small carp. Might be just a... No, it's a small carp. Do you know what? I thought it was a bream the way it was whizzing around, but it is. Say a small carp is probably about 3 pounds. Lovely fish to finish up on, whizzing about all over the place. Actually took as I dropped the bait in. I don't know how it managed to get through all those other little fish. Beautiful mirror carp. Probably is 3 or 4 pounds. The thing is, I've got proper gear on. Proper gear on to actually land it. Look at that. Probably about similar to the fish I started off with today. Probably a similar size. Different type of... Come on, let's get in the net. Oh, beautiful fish. That's a great one to finish up on. Do you know what? I bet it's over 4 pound, that fish. Didn't think it was, just a little, more like a football, a really little round. Look at the shape of it. Just a little round, fat fish, only just hooked. When I hooked it, it went mad. Whizzed into those trees. Look at that. Lovely mirror carp, about 4 pound, but a great fish to finish up on. A really successful day at lake fishing.